The smell. That is the first thing that hits me when I look at this topic. It's a very specific sensory memory.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You walk through those automatic sliding doors, the blast of industrial air conditioning hits you, and you are immediately just assaulted by the scent of what was it, cinnamon brooms? Synthetic phenol.
It was definitely potpourri. And maybe a hint of fresh cotton sheets that have been sitting in plastic packaging for, 6 months. It's
Yes.
a very distinct olfactory cocktail.
That's the one. Today, we are going back to a place that, for a solid 2 decades, really defined the suburban weekend for millions of people. I mean, if you needed a towel, a spatula, or a gadget to slice an avocado that you would absolutely never use,
Oh, you had to have the avocado slicer.
this was the place.
Ugh.
We were talking about linens and things.
It's a name that feels like a time capsule now, doesn't it? It just conjures up these images of, like, beige walls and endless, endless aisles.
It really does.
But before we write it off as just another nostalgia trip, we have to look at the sheer scale of this operation. This wasn't just some mom-and-pop shop. At its peak, this was a retail empire.
The numbers in the source material are actually staggering when you look at them. We are talking about 571 stores.
571.
That is a massive footprint. They were in 47 U.S. states and 6 Canadian provinces.
And the workforce, too. They employed over 7,300 people as of late 2006. That is the size of a small town's population just on their payroll.
Exactly. So the mission for this deep dive isn't just to, reminisce about buying shower curtains. It's to figure out how something that big, something that generated nearly $3 billion a year, just evaporates.
Well, it didn't just evaporate, though, and I think that is the key. It was dismantled. This is a classic, almost tragic case study of the American category killer.
Okay, that term category killer, we're going to get into that.
We will. Because you see the full life cycle here. You see the scrappy, family-founded beginning, the explosion into a corporate behemoth, the private equity takeover, and then this strange modern phenomenon, the zombie afterlife.
That term zombie brand is something we are going to spend some time on later because it is fascinating and, frankly, a little dystopian.
It really is.
But let's start at the beginning. Because for a store that became synonymous with big box retail, the origin story is surprisingly, small.
It's incredibly humble, and to understand it, you have to kind of place yourself in the retail landscape of the late 1950s. It was a totally different world.
Right, we're talking 1958 specifically.
Exactly. So in November of 1958, you have a man named Eugene Wallace Culkin. Now, Culkin didn't wake up one day and decide to build a massive superstore. The concept of a superstore didn't really even exist in the way we think of it now.
Right.
He started with something called a leased linen department.
Okay, pause there. Leased linen department. I feel like we don't see this model as much anymore, or maybe we just don't notice it. How exactly did that work?
It's actually a very clever, really low-risk way to enter retail. Imagine a large discount chain. In this case, the source says it was a store called Great Eastern Mills in New Jersey.
Great Eastern Mills, okay.
They sell everything, but they don't necessarily want to manage the inventory and the logistics for every single category. I mean, it's a huge headache to source towels and sheets if your main business is, say, dry goods or hardware.
So they basically outsourced the headache.
Precisely. They let an outside expert, in this case Culkin, come in and rent space. He's basically a tenant operating inside their store.
A store within a store. I see that now sometimes with, like, Sephora inside a Kohl's or something.
That's the modern equivalent, exactly. He rents a corner of the floor plan. He brings his own sheets, his own towels, his own staff. He pays Great Eastern Mills either a cut of the sales or a flat rent, and he keeps the profit.
And he doesn't have to build a building. He doesn't have to pay for the parking lot lights or the security guard at the front door. He just sells linens.
He's just selling linens. It's a parasite model, but in the best possible business sense. He's drafting off the foot traffic that the bigger store already generates.
Symbiotic is probably the term they'd use in business school.
Symbiotic, yes. A much kinder term. But it allowed him to test the market without this massive capital expenditure. And he did this for a long time. The source points out he established this department in 1958, but the first actual store with the name Linens and Things on the sign didn't open until August 1970.
Wow, that's 12 years. That is a long incubation period.
It really is. He spent over a decade perfecting his product assortment, understanding the customer, and saving up capital. And even when that first store opened in East Brunswick, New Jersey, the wording in the history is very specific. It says Great Eastern Mills opened the first store.
So he was still operating under the umbrella of this larger parent company.
Right, a company called Dalen Inc. And that turned out to be a really dangerous place to be. Because the 1970s, I mean, they were just brutal economically. We talk about inflation now, but the 70s were a graveyard for retailers.
A total mess. Stagflation, high interest rates.
And Dalen Inc. was one of the casualties. So in 1975, the host body dies. Dalen went bankrupt.
So this is the moment of truth for Culkin, right? His landlord, his corporate parent, essentially, is going out of business. The ship he's been sailing on for 17 years is sinking from under him.
Most people would have just packed up their towels and gone home. But Culkin did something very bold. He looked at the wreckage of Dalen Inc. and saw 7 locations of his concept that were actually working. He realized that while the parent company was failing, his specific linen concept was still totally viable.
So he bought them out of the bankruptcy.
Correct. He extracted those 7 units and incorporated Linens and Things, Inc. as a completely independent entity. This is the moment, 1975, where the company truly begins its life as we knew it. It's no longer just a department, it's a chain.
I love that pivot. It's the classic phoenix rising from the ashes moment in a business story.
It really is.
And once he had control, he didn't waste any time. The source says they went from those 7 salvage stores in 1975 to 55 stores by 1983.
Which for that era is incredibly rapid scaling. You have to remember, this is all pre-internet. Scaling meant physically finding real estate, negotiating leases, setting up distribution, physically stocking warehouses, hiring managers.
A huge logistical upgrade.
It's massive. So going from 7 to 55 in 8 years is incredibly aggressive growth. It just proves that the core concept specialty home goods at a discount was really resonating with the American public.
But 1983 marks the end of what you could call the founder era, doesn't it?
It does, and this is the first major lesson in our case study, the liquidity event. Culkin builds this successful regional chain, he proves the model works, and then the big sharks start circling. In 1983, Linens and Things is acquired by the Melville Corporation.
Melville Corporation. That just sounds like one of those faceless conglomerates that owns everything from, I don't know, shoe stores to pharmacies.
And you're not wrong. They were a massive player at the time. To give you some context, they owned CVS, they owned Marshalls at one point, KB Toys. They were a huge portfolio holder.
So for Linens and Things, this meant access to some really deep pockets.
Exactly. They were no longer just a successful independent chain. They were now a corporate asset with serious capital behind them, ready to be scaled up on a national level.
And that capital is what fueled the next phase. This is the era I really remember, the Superstore Wars.
The late 80s and the 90s, the golden era of the category killer.
Can we define that term, category killer? It sounds so violent.
It is violent economically speaking. A category killer is a specialty retailer that focuses on one single category of goods like tools for Toys R Us, electronics for Best Buy, or in this case, home goods for Linens and Things. And they offer such a massive selection and such deep inventory at low prices that no small independent store can possibly compete.
They just overwhelm them.
They kill the category for everyone else. Your local mom and pop shop on Main Street might have, 3 types of toasters.
Right.
You walk into Linens and Things, and they had an entire aisle of toasters, every brand, every color.
You go there because you know they will have what you're looking for. It becomes a destination.
It does. And the architect of this phase for Linens and Things was a guy named Norman Axelrod. He became CEO in 1989, and he is the one who really pushed the big box superstore format that we all remember.
This is when they moved out of the smaller mall stores or strip centers and into those giant standalone boxes with the ridiculously high ceilings.
Yes. The strategy was destination shopping. They didn't need to be in the mall anymore. They were the reason you got in your car and left the house.
But they weren't the only ones doing this. You absolutely cannot tell this story without mentioning the other guy, the one with the blue logo.
Bed Bath & Beyond.
The arch nemesis.
They were the Coke and Pepsi of home goods, no question. And the source explicitly mentions that they were locked in a race for locations. This was a full-on land grab.
It's true. If you drive through suburban America, even today, you will often see them right across the street from each other in the same power center. That was not an accident.
Not at all. They were fighting tooth and nail for the same customer base, usually that upper middle class suburbanite who was decorating a new home or, setting up a wedding registry.
It brings up an interesting question about differentiation, though, because to me, as a shopper, they felt almost identical inside. Did the source highlight any real differences in how they operated or how they tried to position themselves?
It's subtle, but yes. Bed Bath & Beyond became famous, almost infamous, for their coupon strategy.
The big blue postcard.
A big blue 20% off coupon that never expired. People hoarded them in their glove compartment.
My mom had a stack of them.
Everyone's mom had a stack.
Yep.
Linens and Things, especially in the later years under Axelrod, tried to focus more on an everyday low-price model.
That's the Walmart model, basically.
It is. The idea is you don't need a coupon to get a good deal here. We're just always offering a fair price. They also tried to position themselves as having slightly more high-end, curated brands. But as we'll see, sticking to that strategy gets really difficult when you have shareholders breathing down your neck.
And speaking of shareholders, that brings us to 1996.
The IPO, the initial public offering. Melville Corporation, the parent company, reorganized. It became CVS Corporation, and they decided to spin off Linens and Things as its own independent, publicly traded company.
Which means now they have to answer to Wall Street. They have quarterly earnings calls.
And that relentless, insatiable demand for growth, you can't just be profitable. You have to be more profitable than you were 3 months ago. The stock market does not like a flat line, even if it's a profitable flat line.
And for a while, they really delivered on that. I mean, let's look at the peak. The source cites the numbers from 2005, which was really their zenith.
The peak performance year. In 2005, revenue hit $2.7 billion.
$2.7 billion. That is a lot of shower curtains and bath mats.
It is a massive volume of goods, and the source defines their business strategy very clearly at this point. They wanted to offer, quote, high-quality, brand-name home furnishings at exceptional everyday values.
There's that key phrase again, everyday values.
It implies a strategy of consistency, not relying on sales gimmicks, but being a reliable place for good value. And the other part of the strategy was maintaining low operating costs. So, run a lean and mean operation, sell billions of dollars of goods. It seemed to be working perfectly.
If you froze time in 2005, you'd say this is a bulletproof business. They had fought the superstore wars. They had a huge market share. It looked like they'd won.
But then comes 2006. And this is section 3 of our story, the private equity pivot. This feels like the moment where the music in the movie changes from a major key to a very ominous minor key.
It absolutely is the turning point. In February 2006, the company is acquired by Apollo Global Management.
Apollo Global Management, that sounds serious. They're one of the heavyweights.
They are one of the biggest names in private equity. And the price tag for this deal was $1.3 billion.
So this is a fundamental structural change for the company. They go from being a public company where you or I could look up their stock price every day to a private-owned business, specifically a limited partnership.
Okay, we need to break this down for the listener because you hear the term private equity and it can just sound like jargon. What does this actually mean for the store on the ground? When a firm like Apollo buys a company like Linens and Things, they aren't usually buying it with a suitcase full of cash they have lying around, right? Rarely, if ever. This is usually done through a financial maneuver called a leveraged buyout, or an LBO.
Can you explain that like I'm 5? Or maybe like I'm 12?
I'll try. Imagine you want to buy a house that costs $1 million. You only have $100,000 in cash, so you go to a bank and you borrow the other $900,000. You buy the house.
Okay, simple enough. But here's the trick. In a corporate LBO, you don't pay that $900,000 mortgage from your own salary. You make the house pay the mortgage.
So the company, Linens and Things, suddenly ends up on the hook for the massive debt that was just used to buy it.
In many cases, yes. That's the burden the source refers to later on. The debt from the acquisition is placed onto the company's own balance sheet. Suddenly, Linens and Things isn't just trying to sell enough towels to pay for the lights and the staff and the inventory. They have to sell enough towels to service this massive new interest payment every single month.
That seems incredibly risky.
It works if the economy keeps booming. It works if you can find new ways to cut costs and increase efficiency to generate more cash. But it leaves you with absolutely zero margin for error. It's like driving a race car at 200 miles per hour. If the track is perfectly straight and smooth, you're fine. But if there is one bump in the road,
you crash. And we know some bumps were coming in the economy. But even before that, you see an immediate leadership shakeup.
Right. Norman Axelrod, the guy who built the superstore empire for over a decade, leaves.
He's out. And in comes a new team. Robert, or Bob DeNicola, as CEO. You also have F. David Coder as president, and Omer Fancy as EVP of marketing. New team, new playbook.
And the source highlights a very, very specific change in strategy under this new Apollo ownership. They moved away from that everyday low price model that we just talked about.
Yes. They pivoted to, and I'm quoting here, splashy clearance sales and product promotions.
Okay, but why? If the other model was so successful for so long, why change it?
I think it comes down to one word: cash. When you have a massive debt payment due every quarter, you need cash now. And splashy clearance sales are a great way to drive a quick burst of revenue. It's like a sugar rush for the balance sheet.
But it's a dangerous game. You get that short-term spike in sales, but in the long term, you train your customers to never, ever pay full price again. They just wait for the next 50% off everything sale.
It completely erodes the brand's perception of value. Instead of being a place for high-quality everyday values, it becomes a place for cheap stuff that's on sale right now. It's a fundamental shift.
So we have new owners, a new CEO, a new strategy, and a mountain of new debt. Let's fast forward just a year and a half. We are now in late 2007. This is section 4 of the outline, the financial unraveling.
We have a real snapshot here from their SEC filing the Form 10Q for the quarter that ended on September 29, 2007. This document is like a health checkup for the company right before the illness becomes terminal.
Okay, so what did the numbers look like?
Well, net sales were $666.8 million. Now, Interestingly, that was actually up slightly from the previous year, which was $658.2 million.
Up. Okay, so sales are up. On the surface, that sounds good, right? If I'm a casual observer, I see the line going up and I think things are okay.
You would think so. But this is where you have to look behind the headline number. You have to look at the why. And the expert analysis, which the source material includes, clarifies that sales only went up because they had opened new stores in that time.
Ah, I see. So the total amount of money coming in is bigger, but it doesn't mean the individual stores are actually healthy.
Exactly. It's artificial growth. And that is where the key metric, comparable store sales, comes in. For the stores that were open for at least a year, that number actually declined.
So the existing stores were making less money than they did the year before. That's the real health indicator.
That's the indicator. And here is the really concerning part from that report. The source explicitly attributes that decline to fewer customer transactions.
Ouch. People just weren't walking in the door as often.
Fewer people were coming in. Now, the average transaction value did increase a little bit, meaning the people who did come in spent a bit more. Maybe they were buying more because of those splashy sales.
But you cannot sustain a retail business, especially a category killer that relies on huge volume, if your foot traffic is dropping off a cliff. That's a 5-alarm fire.
And meanwhile, while the sales are getting shaky, the losses are just piling up.
This is where that debt burden we discussed becomes undeniable. The source says it plainly. The company was burdened with debt after private equity buyouts.
Let's look at the specific loss numbers for that one quarter, the quarter ending in September 2007.
Okay.
The operating loss was $56.6 million. The year before, in the same quarter, it was only a $17.9 million loss.
Wow, that is a huge jump in the operating loss.
It's massive. And then when you look at the net loss, which is the bottom line after you factor in interest payments on that debt and taxes, it was $79.9 million lost in just 3 months, compared to $27.4 million lost the prior year.
So the loss is nearly tripled in 1 year.
Tripled. When you see a trend line like that, losses accelerating while your core customer traffic is declining, it is a flashing red light on the dashboard. They were burning cash way faster than they could possibly bring it in.
And that brings us to 2008, the year of the collapse. And it really feels like it happened incredibly fast.
It did. The unraveling was just rapid. Section 5 of our deep dive starts with the first public warning signs in April of 2008. The New York Post reported rumors that Linens and Things was trying to sell off its Canadian division.
And from what I understand, the Canadian division was actually pretty profitable.
It was. That's the irony. In a lot of these cross-border retail bankruptcies, the Canadian arms are actually healthier. The competition landscape is different up there.
So they were trying to sell off the one healthy part of the business to save the rest.
It seems so. But the company, officially, refused to confirm the sale rumors. They would only admit that they had hired an advisor to look into strategic alternatives.
Strategic alternatives. That is the most notorious piece of corporate jargon. It's code for help, we are drowning and looking for any lifeline we can find.
Pretty much, yes. It means they're looking to sell, find a merger partner, anything to avoid the inevitable.
And they didn't find a solution fast enough. The timeline here is brutal. Just a few weeks later, May 2, 2008.
The Chapter 11 bankruptcy filing.
And the immediate impact of that filing was closing 120 stores.
Just like that. That's roughly 20% of their entire fleet gone overnight.
Now, I want to clarify something for the listener because it's an important distinction. Chapter 11 doesn't always mean the end of the road, right?
That's a great point. It's not liquidation. Not yet.
Right. Airlines file for Chapter 11 all the time and keep flying. It's a reorganization. The goal is to hit pause on your debt payments, renegotiate with your creditors, and hopefully come out leaner and stronger on the other side.
And they really, really try to do that. In August of 2008, they devised a plan to emerge from bankruptcy. It's clear that the management team at this point realized that the Apollo strategy wasn't working.
The splashy sales strategies.
Exactly. They wanted to reverse that entirely. The plan was to go back to basics.
It sounds like a corporate confession. Okay, we messed up. Let's go back to what actually worked in 2005.
That's exactly what it was. They wanted to stop the constant clearance sales and return to the everyday low price model that had built the company. They also wanted to improve the quality of their merchandise, and this is a crucial detail, keep the shelves properly stocked.
Which implies that during the financial trouble, they were having problems paying their suppliers, so the shelves were getting empty. And that is a death spiral in retail.
It's the absolute worst thing. A customer walks in, sees empty shelves, and they don't just not buy something that day. They don't come back next time.
So they tried to undo the damage of the last 2 years, but the timing was just catastrophic.
As I noted in the intro, it feels like it was too little, way too late.
It was. You simply cannot pivot a ship that large that quickly when you are already in bankruptcy court. And you have to consider the broader context. This is August 2008.
The global financial crisis is knocking on the door. Hard.
Lehman Brothers is about to collapse in a few weeks. The entire global economy is on the verge of crashing. Credit markets were completely frozen. In a normal economy, maybe, and it's a big maybe, someone lends them the money they need to restart. But in late 2008, there was no money available to float a struggling retailer. No one was taking that risk.
And so the final blow comes in October.
October 7, 2008, Bloomberg News reports they've asked the bankruptcy court for permission to auction off the remaining stores.
This is the moment they give up on reorganization.
This is the pivot to liquidation. And then just a week later, on October 14th, the official sale to asset recovery specialists.
That's a nice term for liquidators.
The guys who come in and sell everything off down to the shelves and the cash registers.
And on October 17, 2008, the signs go up in the windows, those big, ugly yellow and red signs. Going out of business. Everything must go.
It's such a sad sight in any retail landscape. It marked the definitive end of the brick-and-mortar era for the company. The final sales concluded on December 28, 2008.
Right after Christmas.
So they got one last holiday season of liquidation sales, and then the doors were locked for good.
Now, before we get to the really strange zombie part of the story, the company's afterlife, there is this really weird, almost poetic cinematic interlude that I found in the source material. Just too good not to mention.
I know exactly what you're talking about. It's the Wes Anderson connection.
Yes. Who would have thought that a bankrupt Linens and Things would become a footnote in the filmography of Wes Anderson?
It's a truly fascinating detail. So this is in 2011, a few years after all the stores have closed and are sitting empty. There was a vacant Linens and Things store in Middletown, Rhode Island.
Just a big, empty concrete box. You can just picture it. Probably still has the faded outline of the sign on the building.
And Wes Anderson, the director known for his incredibly stylized, whimsical, handcrafted aesthetic, used that empty store to construct and film a bunch of the interior sets for his movie Moonrise Kingdom.
That is just wild to imagine. Inside this hollowed-out shell of corporate retail, of mass-produced goods, they are in there building these intricate, quirky, beautiful little sets.
It really is a poetic image, isn't it? The ultimate symbol of mass-market consumerism, emptied out, and then temporarily filled with this very artistic, very specific world of a film. It's a strange and wonderful little footnote in the company's history, like a flower growing in a crack in the parking lot.
I love that.
Yeah.
But okay, back to the business side of things. The stores are closed, the movie sets are packed up and gone. At this point, you would think Linens and Things is dead and buried.
But in the digital age, brands rarely stay dead. They just become, well, undead.
And that brings us to Section 7, the zombie brand.
This phenomenon is so interesting. The physical business failed, the stores failed, the logistics failed, the debt structure failed. But the brand name, the two words linens and things, that still had value in people's minds.
People knew it. They trusted it.
Exactly. So even though the stores were gone, the intellectual property was worth something, and someone was going to buy it.
And it happened practically immediately. In February 2009, while the physical stores were still empty and dark, the website lnt.com was relaunched.
Right. A new ownership group took over just the e-commerce assets. They continued to focus on housewares. The idea is simple. Capture all the residual traffic of people who are still typing linens and things into Google, looking for the store they used to shop at.
So if I went to that website in 2009, I wasn't buying from the same company that went bankrupt.
Not at all. You were buying from a completely different entity that had simply purchased the intellectual property. They bought the logo, the customer email list, and the domain name. It's like they're wearing the old company's skin.
That is a gruesome but incredibly accurate analogy. Skin suit? And then from there, the brand just gets passed around like a hot potato.
It really does. It enters what the source calls the ownership carousel. In December 2013, the brand was sold by Gordon Brothers and Helco Global, those are the original liquidation firms, to another company called Galaxy Brand Holdings.
Galaxy Brand Holdings sounds very futuristic.
They're brand managers. They buy up names like this and try to license them out or run a very lean online operation. But the most interesting chapter in this Afterlife story starts in 2020, July 2020.
The Ravi era.
Ravi Retail Ecommerce Ventures.
This is a holding company founded by Alex Mayer and Ty Lopez. Wait, the here in my garage with my Lamborghini guy from all those YouTube ads.
The very same. He and his partner built a business model almost entirely around buying up these distressed brands.
So their whole business model is, what? Corporate necromancy.
Yeah.
They go around buying the corpses of these fallen retail giants.
That's a great way to put it. They buy brands that everyone over a certain age knows, but that went bust in the physical world. And they try to revive them purely as e-commerce businesses.
The source lists some of the other brands they bought, and it's like a graveyard of the 90s shopping mall.
It really is. Who else is in their collection?
Let's see, Dress Barn, Model Sporting Goods, the Franklin Mint, Pier 1 Imports.
Pier 1, that's another one that hits that same nostalgic nerve.
Radio Shack.
They bought Radio Shack.
They bought Radio Shack. It's the same strategy. You buy the name for a tiny fraction of what it was worth at its peak. You don't have the overhead of 500 stores. You don't have 7,000 employees. You just have the URL and the logo.
And you're banking on the fact that when people need some obscure cable or battery, they'll trust the name Radio Shack more than a random no-name seller on Amazon.
But does it actually work? Is Linens and Things now thriving as an online zombie?
Well, that is the big question, because the source gives us a pretty crucial update from just last year, from 2023, that suggests it might not be a foolproof plan.
Right. So November 2020, REV relaunches the Linens and Things website again. But then, on March 2, 2023...
The source notes that REV, the parent company, the corporate necromancer, announced it was considering its own bankruptcy filing.
Wait, hold on. So the company that built its business on buying bankrupt companies is now on the verge of going bankrupt itself.
The irony is just off the charts. It highlights just how volatile and difficult the retail sector is. Even when you strip away all the costs of brick-and-mortar stores, even just running it as a lean website, it is incredibly hard to make money.
It turns out that simply owning a nostalgic name isn't enough. You still have to run a good business. You still have to compete with Amazon and Wayfair and everyone else.
So the zombie might die again?
Or it might get sold out of RV's potential bankruptcy to another holding company who will try to revive it all over again. The cycle could just continue forever. The name might outlive all of us.
That's a mind-boggling thought.
It is. So let's just trace that arc one more time. We've gone from a leased linen department in a discount store in 1958 to a multi-billion-dollar 571-store empire, to a debt-burdened casualty of the 2008 crash, to a movie set for Wes Anderson, to a digital ghost pass between online investors.
It is a wild ride, an absolute textbook example of the modern retail life cycle.
So let's wrap this up. What is the big takeaway here when we look at this entire, 60-plus year arc?
For me, I think the biggest lesson is about fragility. We tend to look at these big category killers, these massive chains with huge concrete and steel buildings, and we think they are invincible, permanent fixtures of the landscape.
Right.
But this story shows that when you load them up with too much debt, make a few strategic missteps, and then hit a rough economic patch, they can crumble incredibly, shockingly fast.
And for me, the takeaway is about the nature of a brand versus a business. I can still go to lnt.com today,
Yeah.
but am I really buying from linens and things? Not really. I'm buying from a company that just owns the logo. The actual experience walking into that store, smelling the potpourri, touching the towels, that is gone forever.
That's a great point. It completely separates the brand from the business. The business died in 2008. The brand is just a ghost that's left haunting the internet.
Which brings us to our final provocative thought for you, the listener. We live in a world that is now full of these zombie brands.
We do, more and more every year.
So the next time you are shopping online and you see a familiar, nostalgic name from your childhood, whether it's Linens and Things or Radio Shack or Pier 1 or any of the others, ask yourself this. Are you buying into the quality and the trust that built that name 50 years ago? Or are you just buying the nostalgia of the logo?
That is the multi-billion-dollar question. Buyer beware.
Thanks for diving deep with us today. We'll see you on the next one.
Goodbye.